gifts. Christmas gifts to each other, but more importantly, O Lord, our tithes to you. Lord, everything that we have is yours. We just give a portion back. Lord, we'd ask that you would bless the offering, but also bless the giver. We ask all this in your name. Amen. We're going to take a little leap this morning and not necessarily talk about the birth, but I do want to read from Luke chapter 2, the birth, before we take the leap 32, 33 years later in Jesus' life. I'm going to read from Luke chapter 2. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken in the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. You ever think this is pretty amazing? Just sort of, I wasn't going to talk about this part, but just ever think about how amazing this is? Because we're going to read here, we're going to see Joseph went up to the town of Nazareth in Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. King David was 900 years earlier. How many of us know our ancestors 900 years ago? How many of us know our ancestors from 200 years ago? Anybody? Has anybody done the genealogy, the study back even 200 years? You do? Okay, so one family here. Maybe you know, how far back have you guys gone?
Until they had surnames. Before they had surnames, which is last names.
Okay. So like 1700s. Okay. So you've gone, Mary, you've gone back about 300 years then. This is 900 years. For 900 years, the Jewish people were keeping track of what families they were part of. I think that just for me, it's mind-boggling. Anyway, that was sort of a rabbit trail. We just went down. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and laid him in the manger because there was no room for them in the inn. To me, it's just totally mind-boggling and amazing how God has set up, way from Genesis, this whole timeline of events. Whole timeline of events. So King David is born, and God knows that 900 years later, the descendant of David is going to be the Messiah. God knows that the Roman world is going to be there, and with the Roman world, Quirinius is going to be able to call for this, or Caesar Augustus is going to call for this census. But even go back farther with me. Go back farther to the Exodus. During the time of the Exodus of the Jewish people, God led the Jewish people. God fed the Jewish people. God gave them water in the desert from the rock. A couple of times God gave them rock. For 40 years God gave them manna from heaven. For 40 years God gave them the pillar of light by night and the cloud by day. That took place on the Exodus. 1600 years after the Exodus, Jesus shows up on the scene. And the Jewish people are having, my pant leg. I'm looking down like, okay, what's going on? Thank you, Kathy. My daughter-in-law will tell me I hear some chuckles going on. Thank you, Kathy. I couldn't figure out why this side was sort of chuckling at first, and I walk over here, you guys all started laughing a little bit. I did that about 4 or 5 years ago. I went the whole service, and nobody said, I don't know, you probably don't remember, but nobody said anything the whole service. It was stuck up there. The Exodus. fed manna from heaven, water from the rocks, the light by night, the fire by night, and the pillar of cloud by day. The Jewish people had then a festival called the Festival of the Tabernacle, or Festival of Feasts. It was called 2 or 3 different names. And during this festival, they would remember the Old Testament time when God gave them manna. And what does Jesus say during this festival? I am the bread of life. I am. Ego ami, from the Hebrew language. Ego ami. I am the bread of life. Going back to the manna. During this festival, Jesus says, I am the water of life. Going back to the Exodus, water from the rock. Ego ami. I am the water of life. But Jesus also says during this festival, and you got to just sort of wrap your mind around this. Jerusalem, 2,000 years ago, is a time where they don't have electricity at night. You know, we know how dark it gets when the electricity goes out. If the street lights go out, you can't find the street you're going to. You know, we know how difficult it is. Just imagine a major metropolis without lights at all. During this festival, in the temple, the Jewish temple, the Hebrew temple, they would resurrect these 4 huge candelabras and light them for the 8 days of the festival. And the historian Josephus, who was a Jewish individual, but he wrote for the Roman world. He worked for the Roman world. He wrote about the fact that these candelabras in Jerusalem lit up the whole city at night. They were so bright. And they were lit in order to remind the people that God said, or that God gave them the light. The fire by night and the cloud by day to lead them. And it's in the midst of all this that Jesus says, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. In the midst of these candelabras, in the midst of the Jewish people remembering the Exodus from years ago, he says, I am, ego amin, I am the light of the world. He doesn't say, I am the light of the desert. He doesn't say, I am the light of the Jewish people. He doesn't say, I am the light of the Middle East. He doesn't say, I am the light of just the future Christians. He says, I am the light of the world. What's the song that we sing? Joy to the world. That sounds sort of sad. Joy to the world. He says, I am the light of the world. Not just of Jews, not just of Christians, not just of the Middle East, but of the world. Ego amin. So it makes me wonder, we got to ask the question, what is light? Well, I looked in the Webster Dictionary, and it's interesting because Webster's Dictionary simply says that light is something that makes vision possible. I don't know about you, that's not a very definitive response of what light is. Light is something that makes vision possible. I think we all know we can get online and we can do all the study of light and light rays, and there is so much more to light. But I wanted this morning to just bring out 4 different ideas about light. 4 different ideas which probably most of us already understand, but I just want to highlight them for you today. The first is light scatters darkness. Light scatters darkness. Isaiah 9:2 says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land, the shadow of death has dawned. Light scatters darkness. About 2 weeks ago, the power pole across the street in Michael and Marika's yard, they had to take it down and they put up a new power pole. In the process, they called up in the morning and said, hey, Pastor, we're going to need to shut the power off for a few hours in church. When is a good time? And I said, oh, do it this afternoon, this certain times.